Here is a drama film about the many families who have lived at a particular home over the course of several centuries. It's kind of cute, but it's really mushy more than anything. Let's talk about it. This movie takes place at one location, collecting the stories of many families who have lived at this particular home. It primarily focuses on the relationship between Ricky and Margaret. Ricky was raised in this home, and the two of them share a lifetime's worth of experiences here. From raising their child to losing their family members here, they have many memories and regrets tied to this home. So it's a movie about time with a non-linear plot structure, which might sound familiar to those of you who saw We Live in Time or watched my recent review. It's the same premise, but with different execution. Movies take a long time to make, so it's really just ironic that these two movies were released so close together. Unlike We Live in Time, which focuses on 3 different time periods that the movie jumps back and forth between, this movie has 6 time periods. For the most part, each time period is moving forward in time, so whenever we leave a time period to go to another and then go back to that one, it picks up about where it left off. I will tell you now that most of those stories did not matter at all. Whenever the camera wasn't on Ricky and Margaret, it just felt like time was being wasted. For a good chunk of the movie, some of those other stories playing out at different time periods were interesting. They each have hooks, but you eventually get to a point where those other stories just feel really pointless because they don't really have that much depth. The only value the movie got from jumping around between different time periods was when there were parallel occurrences. Like they announce Margaret is pregnant in our main time period, and then they jump back to a time period where another character is pregnant. Otherwise, the majority of the time jumps don't have much rhyme or reason to them. They just muddle the story and serve as a distraction from the fact that the main plot line isn't really that interesting. And a couple of them are visited so minimally and infrequently that I can confidently tell you that they did not bring any value to the movie at all. The movie seems to want to be about regret. Most of the time periods revolve around somebody who is either seizing the day or wishing things had happened differently. It's a clever premise for a non-linear plot, but it just wasn't explored with any sort of cogent direction, and it doesn't have anything smart to say about living a life with minimal regrets. Mainly because of the nature of Ricky and Margaret's hardships. They have to make tough decisions that pertain to their family's well-being, and most of the time it doesn't feel like the correct answer is, oh, well, they should seize the day, because their hardships are often circumstantial. I really hate to sound super edgy, but I think that their biggest regret is actually just not wearing a condom, though that isn't ever expressed. Instead, we just get lots of stilted lines about time and regret. Things like, if you decide to do something, don't wait. Oh, what could have been. Don't worry about the past. The future is the only direction that we are headed. Yes, there is plenty of stilted and cliche dialogue like this throughout the movie. It honestly just feels like a Hallmark movie. It's very cliche across the board. If you've ever seen a film about family hardships, this one will be very familiar and unfortunately very mushy. The most interesting thing about this movie is that it was shot entirely in one room at one camera angle through the ages. It's a cool idea, but it also just puts a lot of limitations on the production, so some of the CGI and VFX came out looking really mediocre. Starting, of course, with the de-aging of Tom Hanks and Robin Wright, which does lean into the unfortunate uncanny valley, giving She-Hulk a run for her money. There are times where it's not bad, for whatever that's worth, but the majority of the time it wasn't fooling anyone. These actors are just too old to be de-aged to teenagers. Yes, they are actually teenagers when they first meet. This especially did not work because their voices don't sound young at all. At one point, Ricky's dad is yelling at him, and he goes, "You're just 18 years old." And I actually really thought this was hilarious. It reminded me of the running gag in Walk Hard, where John C. Reilly plays the teenage version of himself, and he repeatedly clarifies his age. There were so many scenes where Ricky looked older than both of his parents, because they also did not do a good job of aging some characters up. At some point watching this, you just have to accept that nobody is going to authentically portray their supposed ages and just move on from the idea of that getting any better. And there are a few other bad VFX moments that will give you the yikes expression. There was one that stood out to me in particular where a character fell down. I don't understand why they wouldn't just cast an actor who doesn't have an issue falling down, because clearly this guy did. It was like the most fake looking shot of somebody falling down in a movie I've ever seen. So the movie has some heart to it. There are some moments where you really feel for them just because of the sheer relatability of their hardships. But the movie overall is just cheesy and sloppy. The novelty of the sole camera angle and the nostalgia bait of this being a Forrest Gump reunion film just aren't enough to carry this cliche-ridden story. I'd call this a generally lacking movie. At best, it's something to play in the background while you're doing something else once it comes to streaming. If you're looking for a romance film to see at the theater this weekend and you were considering this, I'd say opt for We Live in Time if you want a movie with a similar premise. But honestly, I really think that Anora is just the love story to see in theaters right now. If you can find a screening, you should definitely check it out. Thank you for watching this review. If it brought you any value at all, please give it a like. It really does help the channel grow. I'll see you later this week with my review of Juror Number 2.